Let's get straight to the point. Number 8. The monster study. Imagine being a child with a normal, healthy ability to speak. Then some scientist strolls in and decides, hey, let's break that. Welcome to the 1939 monster study, where a group of researchers in Iowa thought it would be fun to intentionally give children speech problems for science. The idea was to see if you could cause stuttering by repeatedly telling kids that their perfectly fine speech was. So half the children got encouragement and positive feedback, and the other half got the "you're speaking wrong, stop it" treatment every time they opened their mouths. The result? Lifelong speech anxiety, self-esteem issues, and in some cases, actual stuttering. And the kicker? The children were orphans, because of course they were. Nothing says ethical research like emotionally damaging kids who already have no parents to complain for them. This went on quietly for decades until someone finally admitted it happened. The name Monster Study wasn't an exaggeration, it was a confession. Basically, it was a science experiment sponsored by the Department of Childhood Nightmare. Number 7. Unit 731. If history had a do not Google list, this would be at the very top. Unit 731 was Japan's little secret during World War II. A secret that involved vivisections, frostbite experiments, and releasing plague-infected fleas just to see what would happen. Spoiler. What happened was plague. Prisoners of war, civilians, even children were used like crash test dummies for every disease and injury the human body could experience. And just when you think it couldn't get more disturbing, some of these tests were done without anesthesia, because apparently, pain was part of the data. The worst part? After the war, many of the scientists involved weren't punished. In fact, some got immunity in exchange for handing their research over to the US, because apparently, if your crimes are horrifying enough, you get a job interview instead of a trial. The whole thing was basically a horror movie script, except it was real, and the bad guys walked away with pensions. Number 6. The Stanford Prison Experiment Picture. This, you sign up for a psychology study, thinking you'll answer a few questions, maybe wear some wires, and walk away with beer money. Instead, you end up in a fake prison where your friends suddenly start acting like sociopathic prison guards after about 12 hours. That's the Stanford Prison Experiment, 1971. Psychologist Philip Zimbardo wanted to see how power changes behavior. Spoiler. It turns out it changes it immediately. College students were split into guards and prisoners, and it took less than a day for the guards to start humiliating, depriving, and psychologically crushing their classmates. Prisoners had breakdown. Guards invented punishments just for fun. And Zimbardo? He was too busy playing prison warden to notice the ethics train derailing at high speed. It was supposed to last 2 weeks. It ended in 6 days. The conclusion? Give someone a uniform and a little authority, and they'll go full villain faster than you can say, "I'm just following orders." Basically, it was the worst improv class ever held. Number 5. The Aversion Project. If you think conversion therapy is a modern disaster, wait until you hear about what happened in apartheid-era South Africa. Between the 1960s and 1980s, the military decided it didn't want LGBTQ+ people in its ranks. Instead of just discharging them, they took it several war crimes further. People suspected of being gay were subjected to chemical castration, electric shock therapy, and sometimes outright gender reassignment surgeries, all without consent. The project was led by a military doctor who somehow managed to combine homophobia, pseudoscience, and human rights violations into one efficient nightmare. It wasn't just about curing people, which, by the way, is impossible. It was about erasing them. Victims were often teenagers, conscripted into the army, and found themselves waking up from anesthesia with permanent changes to their bodies. The Aversion Project is one of those experiments that history books like to skip over, probably because it makes evil look like it had a full-time research department. Number 4. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study. If medical ethics had a how not to do it poster, this would be the cover. From 1932 to 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service decided to study the natural progression of syphilis by not telling the patients they had syphilis. Around 600 African American men in Tuskegee, Alabama, were recruited with promises of free health care. What they actually got was 4 decades of untreated disease, even after penicillin became the standard cure in the 1940s. The researchers literally had the cure in their hands and said, "Nah, let's see what happens if we don't use it." The men suffered organ damage, blindness, dementia, and death, and many passed the disease to their wives and children. The kicker? They were told they were being treated for bad blood. This wasn't just unethical, it was a medical gaslighting masterclass. By the time the truth came out, it became one of the most infamous public health betrayals in history. Basically, the whole study was one long, slow-motion train wreck, where the train was full of doctors who lied about the brakes. Number 3. The Milgram obedience experiment. Imagine you're in a lab, and a scientist in a white coat tells you to press a button that shocks someone in the next room. You hear screams. The scientist says, "Please continue." How far would you go? In 1961, Stanley Milgram found out that the answer was disturbingly far. Volunteers thought they were helping test memory and learning, but the real experiment was to see if people would follow orders, even if it meant harming another person. The victim was an actor. The shocks were fake, but the stress and guilt, completely real. Most participants went all the way up to the maximum voltage just because a calm man with a clipboard told them to. Milgram's takeaway? Regular people will commit horrific acts if they think an authority figure. Humanity's takeaway? We're basically one lab coat away from becoming background villains in a dystopian. It's like science proved that peer pressure works even when the peer is a guy with questionable facial hair and a psychology degree. Number 2. The MK Ultra program. If you've ever watched a conspiracy theory video at 2 a.m. and thought, okay, but this is too crazy to be, congratulations, you just described MK Ultra. From the 1950s to the 1970s, the CIA decided it was time to master mind control. Their method? A buffet of psychological torture, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and, oh yeah, dosing people with LSD without their knowledge. Victims included prisoners, mental patients, soldiers, and even random civilians who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The goal was to figure out how to manipulate the human mind, and the result was a decades-long chaos experiment that destroyed lives. Many test subjects suffered permanent psychological damage, and some didn't survive. When the program was exposed, the CIA shredded most of the files, because apparently the destroy evidence button was easier to press than the stop committing crimes one. MK Ultra wasn't just unethical. It was like the plot of a bad spy thriller, except it was funded by taxpayers. Number 1. The Nazi hypothermia experiments. As if Nazis didn't already have enough horrors on their resume, they decided to find out exactly how much freezing a human body can take. At the Dachau concentration camp, prisoners were submerged in ice water for hours, or left naked outside in freezing temperatures, all in the name of research for German pilots shot down into the sea. Victims would lose consciousness, organs would fail, and sometimes, in a final act of science, they'd be forcefully rewarmed in brutal, painful ways. There was no consent, no anesthesia, and absolutely no ethics, just cruelty dressed up as research. After the war, the data from these experiments sparked a disturbing debate. Can information gathered through atrocity ever be used? Some scientists refused outright, others quietly referenced it. But here's the reality. No amount of scientific value justifies the fact that this was torture with a clipboard. It's the kind of thing that makes you wish time machines existed, just so you could go back and pour hot soup on every single researcher involved. It's only for today. I'll make similar videos in the future. Subscribe to watch them.